Ever wonder how players get more modern sounding lines? Often the secret is altered pentatonics. Let's break them down and make them yours today. Today, we're digging into a concept that will supercharge your lines without adding a whole bunch of complex theory. First, we're going to define what altered pentatonics are, and then we're going to go right into how to apply them. We're going to look at 2 examples where we can use them over dominant chord vamps. Then we're going to look at 3 examples where we can put them into 2-5-1 chord progression. And then finally, we're going to put them right into the repertoire, and we're going to use them over the A section of All the Things You Are. All right, let's get right into it and define what an altered pentatonic is. Now, an altered pentatonic is simply a 5-note pentatonic scale that is then altered in some way. It can be any way. It could be 1 note that's altered. It could be several notes that are altered. And oftentimes we run into situations where we change the notes of the altered pentatonic and we kind of have a hard time defining the name of the altered pentatonic. Now, there are some standard altered pentatonics, but for the most part, I'm going to look at some of the altered pentatonics that are my favorite. As you'll see, I chose to give them names that kind of help define what is altered about them. So let's get right into an example of what an altered pentatonic might be. So if we take our standard major pentatonic scale, remember a pentatonic scale is any 5-note scale. It doesn't have to follow a certain formula to be a pentatonic scale, it just has to have 5 notes. Now the traditional major pentatonic scale is built off of scale degrees 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. So if I were to do that in a C major context, my notes would be C, D, E, G, and A, and it would sound like this. Okay, that's all well and good, but what if I were to alter one of those notes? Basically, I can either replace one of the notes, or I can sharp or flat one of the notes, however you want to think about it. For example, one that I really love to use is replace the 6th scale degree with the sharp 5 or the flat 6. So in this case, we would have C, D, E, G, G sharp, or A flat. Let's hear it. It's already sounding way more modern and more colorful. Let's change a different note. For example, maybe we get rid of the D natural and we put a D flat. Let's keep the rest of the notes, so we're gonna have C, D flat, E, G, A. So everything is the same as our major pentatonic, except that 2nd scale degree is now lowered a half step and what we might call a flat 9. Let's hear it. And let's take it a step further and actually alter 2 of the notes. Let's keep that flat 9 or the D flat, but then let's put in the first alteration that we made, which was the A flat or the G sharp instead of A natural. So now we've got C, D flat, E, G, A flat. Now, what you'll come to find out, and what I'll explain, is that a lot of these scales, these altered pentatonics, are some kind of semblance of a mode of a melodic minor, harmonic major, or even just simply the major scale. So there's often actually a context in which they are built off of, but we're actually superimposing them in situations that we might not traditionally find them. Let's get right into example number 1, which is going to be over our dominant chord vamp. Now, of course, dominant chords lend themselves to lots of tension, and one of my favorite places to really put in some of these altered pentatonics. Let me play through the first example really slowly and follow along and check out the notes that I decided to use as our altered pentatonics, and then we'll break it down. All right, there are 2 altered pentatonics throughout this particular phrase. Our first altered pentatonic is what I call the dominant sharp 5 pentatonic, and our next pentatonic is the Lydian dominant pentatonic. Now remember that most of these names are just kind of names that I've labeled them based on what their alterations are. Another important detail I want to draw your attention to is that I try to start the pentatonics and form them in a way that is closest to maybe a more recognizable pentatonic. So for example, if it's mostly a major pentatonic, that starting note is going to really kind of fall in line with the major pentatonic, or if it's mostly a minor pentatonic, I'm going to use the starting note or the root of what that minor pentatonic is, and then alter notes accordingly, and then name it accordingly. So for example, if we look at that first altered pentatonic here in example number 1, it's mostly an E flat major pentatonic, but it's got the sharp 5 and then it's got the flat 7. So it's really 1, 2, 3 of our major pentatonic, then of course our raised 5th, which is going to give us our B natural, and then our flat 7, which is D flat. So it sounds like this. It really sounds similar to a whole tone scale. We've really just got one note kind of missing in there, which would be the A natural, to make it a hexatonic 6-note whole tone scale. Now look at the next altered pentatonic. That's my Lydian dominant pentatonic. So it's primarily like a major pentatonic, but it's got the raised 4th or the sharp 11, and then of course it's got the flatted 7. So it sounds like this. Again, it could be built off of a lot of different notes, and you could come up with a lot of different names, but I tried to pick things that were most relatable and also that relate to the chord for the most part. Sometimes you'll find in some of these examples that I'm starting on a different note than the root of the chord, and that's perfectly normal. It's just that that pentatonic seemed to lend itself to starting on that root and be more relatable in that instance. So let's look at the first half of that example. Again, we're looking at just the altered pentatonic, which is our dominant sharp 5 pentatonic. Throughout, I'm basically treating the altered pentatonic just like any other scale pattern or any other melodic motif. I'm trying different inversions, I'm trying different ways to create tension and really unique shapes. Check it out. You see, I could simply just kind of play around in that scale and find different patterns that might work. I'm just simply improvising, utilizing those notes. We've got the same concept going throughout all of these altered pentatonics. Now look at the second pentatonic in our example here, the Lydian dominant. I often like to infuse leaps with half steps within my pentatonics. That sort of gives me this built-in tension and more unique shapes. Again, so if I play just simply the pentatonic itself, we have that half step between the C sharp and the D. So if I play what I've got written there, and you don't always have to use all the notes of the pentatonic. Oftentimes I'll skip. It's just like a scale pattern. If we do a scale in thirds, we could do the same thing with an altered pentatonic. It's going to break up those notes and make it sound more fresh. You'll also notice throughout the examples that I often try to bring it back into the key that I'm landing in. And in this case, I come out of that Lydian dominant pentatonic and right back into chord tones and notes that define G7 for the B-flat instruments or F concert. Let's look at example number 2 of our dominant chord vamps. Here here I've got a couple of different pentatonics that I really like to use. I've got the dominant sharp 9 pentatonic. Now remember, I'm basically just naming these based off of the altered notes. So if I've got a minor third and a major third within my pentatonic, I'm going to call that minor third not a minor third, but a sharp 9, because that's how I kind of see it as functioning. You might know what it is, but you might have to communicate what those notes are quickly, and so think about names that really help define that alteration within the pentatonic. So if I play just my dominant sharp 9 pentatonic in this instance, it sounds like this. Again, I've got that mixture of half steps and leaps within my pentatonic. I've got the B flat and the B natural, and then I'm right back into some minor third relationships. Notice the half steps are, in this case, surrounded by minor thirds. My next pentatonic within this example is what I call the Lydian flat 6 or flat 13 pentatonic. The name is a little bit interchangeable with those intervals. You could call it a flat 6, you could call it a flat 13. Oftentimes I try to delineate between maybe a natural 5 and a sharp 5 by calling it a flat 6. In this case, I'm calling it a flat 6 or the flat 13. This is an example of a more tension-filled altered pentatonic because I've got two notes that are altered. I've got my C sharp or my raised 11, and I've got my E flat or my flat 6 or flat 13. Let's play through the example real slowly here. You'll notice I like to take advantage of that half step between the D and the E flat, especially in the upper register on the tenor because it has that singing quality to it. It also has this kind of ethereal, kind of mysterious vibe to it, which often comes with an augmented interval. Of course, you could use the augmented scale, and perhaps we'll cover that in a different video, but that's got more notes. So we're going to keep to that 5-note pentatonic shape. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right into our 2-5-1 examples. Now, you'll notice that throughout these examples, at least for the first two, I actually use minor pentatonics or other pentatonics within the 2 chord and on the 1 chord, and on the 5 chord is where I'm going to use my altered pentatonics. Now, remember, with limitation comes freedom, and by staying with the pentatonics throughout the examples, I kind of force myself into other situations that I might not naturally gravitate towards. Let's look at that first example. You'll notice throughout also that even with my different pentatonics on each of the chords, I'm trying to start and land on mostly chord tones on downbeats, because while I might be thinking of a different pentatonic scale that is not necessarily having the root of the chord, I still want to take advantage of really communicating the harmony by staying kind of close to those chord tones. Again, it's going to give me some different shapes that if I were thinking of it as the root of the chord, maybe like a D minor pentatonic, it's going to give me a different shape that I might gravitate towards, as opposed to thinking of it as a pentatonic starting on something other than the root. Okay, so we simply start out with a D minor pentatonic in this circumstance, and then I go quickly into, on the 5 chord, our altered pentatonic, and I'm going to borrow from some of our earlier examples, and I'm going to grab that dominant sharp 5 pentatonic, which has that really whole tone scale. Now here is an important key concept. Remember I mentioned at the very beginning that oftentimes these altered pentatonics kind of come from a different mode, like maybe melodic minor, or even harmonic major. You could say in this example, the dominant sharp 5 pentatonic actually has all the same notes as our altered scale, which would be the 7th mode of melodic minor. In this case, a G7 means that my altered dominant, or our altered scale, rather, is going to come from A flat melodic minor. Remember, melodic minor is just a major scale with a flatted third, but if I start on my 7th scale degree, I'm going to get that G altered scale, which is going to give me my flat 9, sharp 11, and flat 13, and sound like this. Again, notice that the notes in that example of the altered pentatonic, the dominant sharp 5, all share those same notes. It's just that some of the notes aren't represented in the pentatonic that are in the scale, and it's going to give me different shapes as a result. If we just isolate that pentatonic, you can hear that I don't have the A flat, which would be the flat 9 that I find in my scale, which gives me some more leaps within, especially in this. Remember, it's kind of got that whole note, whole tone scale, except I also have a major third between my G and my B natural. I finish off the example using a pentatonic that is not quite related to the root, and the fact that I'm using A minor pentatonic over our C major. Now, of course, we could get way into the pentatonics, and remember that the minor pentatonic is the same as a major pentatonic, except the minor pentatonic lives off of the 6th scale degree of our major pentatonic. Check out my online community, Next Level Sax, where as a member, you get access to an exclusive variety of information, including videos, weekly PDFs, mini lesson videos, monthly jazz etudes, access to all of my books, digital courses, masterclasses, personalized feedback, and of course, a supportive community where you can ask specific questions. Just click the link below to go next level. Let's look at example number 2. All right, in example number 2, I again start with a minor pentatonic related to the root, so D minor, but check out our 5 chord, my altered pentatonic. It's going to start on the 5th mode of melodic minor rather than the 7th mode. So if my melodic minor is C melodic minor and I start on G, I get this sound in this scale, which we're going to call the Mixolydian flat 13 scale. So in this case, it simply has the F natural, which is making it dominant. That's the Mixolydian part. And then the flat 13 or flat 6 is my E flat. Again, those names are kind of interchangeable. Whether or not you call it a flat 6 or a flat 13 is really up to you. Let's isolate just the 5 chord and play what we've got there. Notice that I take advantage of the large leaps within the pentatonic, and that lends itself to some nice arpeggios. We could have an augmented arpeggio off of E flat, that would be E flat, G, B natural. You could also do a major 7 augmented, which is going to be E flat, G, B, D natural. And notice again, I take advantage in the upper register of the horn to go between the D and the E flat half step because I really love how that really sounds very vocal-like. I continue to our major chord, and instead of utilizing the minor pentatonic off of the 6th scale degree, which was our A minor pentatonic, I utilized the minor pentatonic off the 3rd scale degree, which is our E minor pentatonic. Check it out between the 5 chord and our 1 major chord. I also put in some nice leaps on that major chord to kind of break up the phrasing to make it sound a little bit more modern. Let's check out our final example of the 2-5-1 chord progression. All right, you'll notice in this example that I use 3 different altered pentatonics. And you'll even notice, which I'll explain, that the 2 chord altered pentatonic and the 1 chord altered pentatonic almost have the same name, but you'll notice that the details of the notes kind of dictate what that name is going to be. Let's look at it real slowly first. All right, on the 2 chord, I'm utilizing the major sharp 5 pentatonic. On the 5 chord, I'm using a dominant flat 9 pentatonic. And on the 1 chord, I'm using what I call a major flat 6 pentatonic. Check out on the 2 chord, our major sharp 5 pentatonic has the C sharp built into it. On a D minor 7 chord, you can get away with utilizing C sharp. In fact, I love to use C sharp on a D minor 7 chord as long as I resolve it up the half step, because that is our leading tone in this case. C sharp wants to go to D. But remember that C sharp is also related to our 5 chord, and in this case the A7, C sharp is the 3rd. So if I really go back and forth between the C sharp and resolving it to the D, I'm essentially tonicizing that minor chord utilizing a 5-to-1 root movement, A7 to D minor. And if you want to get further into that, check out some of my other videos where I really break that down and give you some more examples. So if we play the 2 chord altered pentatonic, which is our major sharp 5 pentatonic, it sounds like this. We could really call it a major 7 sharp 5 pentatonic. And the reason I call it a sharp 5 pentatonic versus a flat 6 is because I don't have the natural 5 present. Now you'll see in the 1 chord, let's skip right to the 1 chord so we can compare them. I've got the 5, the natural 5 present, and I've got the sharp 5, so I'm gonna call it a flat 6. So if we look at that major chord pentatonic, it sounds like this. We essentially have 1, 3, 5, flat 6, major 7. Let's play through the 5 chord altered pentatonic, which is my dominant flat 9. Remember, I'm calling it a flat 9 because it is the 2nd scale degree lower to half step. It's in the context of a dominant chord, so it makes more sense to kind of call it by how it's functioning rather than a flat 2. Let's hear what that altered pentatonic sounds like. And let's hear what the line is that I play right there. All right, let's jump into application of the altered pentatonics in the context of the jazz repertoire. We've got it defined as to what an altered pentatonic is. We've got it over dominant chord vamps where we can really stretch out and explore and try new things. And then we've got it in a more controlled circumstance, which is our 2-5-1 progression. So let's put it right into a tune and see if we can really manipulate those altered pentatonics to make sense. We're gonna utilize the A section of All the Things You Are, and basically I'm gonna try and use as many altered pentatonics as I can. I'm going to use them on minor chords. I'm going to use them, of course, on the dominant chords, and I'm going to use them on the major chords. I utilize them more on the dominant chords and the major chords than I do on the minor chords, but you'll find them throughout. I often gravitate towards certain altered pentatonics. As you've seen in some of the previous examples, I really like to use the sharp 5 or the flat 6. So you're going to find that on almost all of the major chords. Let's hop right in and let me play you the first 4 bars real slowly. I start us out right kind of within the key. I use that half step, leading tone F sharp on my G minor. Again, that's going to kind of imply a bit of the 5 chord, give me some tension and resolution. Remember, music is all about tension and resolution. So that F sharp is sort of functioning in a quick way as our 5-1, which would be our D7 back to G minor. Then I simply just kind of stick within a C minor pentatonic on our C minor chord, and then I get right into our altered pentatonics. On the dominant chord, our F7, I'm going to utilize the dominant sharp 5 pentatonic, and on our major chord, I'm going to utilize a major 7 flat 6. Remember, that just means that it's also got the major 5 in it. I just try to keep it kind of consistent and utilize a different label so that we don't have both the 5 and the sharp 5 within the same scale, right? Notice that sharp 5 or that flat 6 resolves down to the 5th. Let's keep going. All right, we're really now into the thick of it, right into the altered pentatonic land here. I keep with my major 7 flat 6 pentatonic on the E flat major, and then I kind of explore a couple of different altered pentatonics. All right, on the short 2-5, we've got E minor 7 to A7. I utilize the altered pentatonic just on the 5 chord, and I decided to use a more tension-filled altered pentatonic, meaning I've got more than one note altered. In this case, I've got a dominant pentatonic with my sharp 9 and my flat 13. Let's play through just that measure. That was just the altered pentatonic A, C, C sharp, F, and G. C is my sharp 9, F is my flat 13. Again, I like to utilize a combination of half steps and larger leaps in my pentatonics because it helps create some more unique shapes. Let's continue to the major chord where I utilize that major 7, flat 6. All right, key concept here, we really want to resolve our tension. We can really play any notes, and the altered pentatonics are a great way to, of course, kind of spur on certain shapes. But notice that I often will resolve that altered note or that tension-filled note to something that is within the chord. In this case, I've got my B flat, which is my flat 6, going down to the major 5th, or the perfect 5th, the A. All right, let's go to our next 4 measures, and I want you to pay attention to a couple of different things. Of course, the altered pentatonics, but also pay attention to what I'm utilizing as far as melodic development. All right, on the first 2 examples, before we get to the altered pentatonics, I'm utilizing this simple melodic motif. Now I launch right into our altered pentatonics, and I decided to create some rhythmic tension utilizing triplets. Of course, that is a great way to kind of get what we call a hemiola or a cross rhythm, where we've got 3 against 4 or 5 against 4, or a whole variety of different cross rhythms that we can create. In this case, it's going to be a 3 against 4, and it's going to place some of my chord tones on less stressed beats within the measure. Let's check out just that 5 chord. Now, a side note here for the saxophone players, when you get to triplets, it's kind of a free-for-all when it comes to articulation. I often found myself maybe slurring or maybe tonguing and stressing the downbeats to kind of lock it in time-wise. Utilize whatever feels natural and how you want to communicate that specific line. So the altered pentatonic we're utilizing over that chord is our dominant flat 6 or flat 13. So if we play just the notes of the altered pentatonic, we get this. Again, one more time, I'll say that I utilize the flat 6 and the natural 5s. That's why I call it a flat 6 rather than having it as a G sharp and called the sharp 5. Let's look at the major chord there. I keep with the triplet feel, and again, I kind of draw upon that raised 5th, and in this case, we're going to call it a major 7, flat 6 pentatonic. So if we put those two together, we've got that string of triplets, the 5 chord and the 1 chord. You'll notice that a certain type of kind of cross rhythm articulation pattern or accents kind of come out because of the way that the line is structured. Usually I'm going to tongue the upbeats in a swing context, but again, the triplets kind of lend themselves to more of a free-for-all. Let's keep going and look at the final 4 measures of our A section. I'm going to keep with that major 7, flat 6 on our B flat major, and when we get to the 2-5, which is B minor to E7, I'm really just drawing upon some more traditional bebop vocabulary. I love to utilize the 5th mode of harmonic minor, which is mixolydian flat 2, flat 6, and as a side note, I love to use this also on the 9th measure of a blues. This is really common. Check out those beboppers like Thelonious Monk and Charlie Parker. They use it all the time. Dizzy Gillespie all the time. So again, on that 5 chord, on the E7, flat 9, I'm going to utilize the 5th mode of harmonic minor, which is mixolydian flat 2, flat 6. That's going to give me a B, an A, a G sharp, an F natural, which is going to be my flat 9, and of course the root. Then I continue on to that major chord, and I'm going to utilize a different altered pentatonic. I'm going to do one that's a bit more tension-filled. It's going to give me the sharp 9 and the flat 6. So we're going to call it a major sharp 9 flat 6 pentatonic. Check out just the major chord. Again, it gives us that really tension-filled kind of mysterious sound. Let's piece it together and come down the harmonic minor mode, which is our mixolydian flat 2, flat 6 into our altered pentatonic. All right, let's piece together that last 4 bars real slowly where you'll hear all the altered pentatonics plus that mode of harmonic minor. All right, we talked about what an altered pentatonic is. Remember, it's any 5-note pentatonic scale in which we alter at least one note from a more traditional pentatonic. It could be a major pentatonic, a minor pentatonic, a dominant pentatonic. It just changed one note, and now it's an altered pentatonic. It could be any note. We talked about how to put that into a dominant chord vamp, how to utilize them over 2-5-1 chord progression, and then finally into the repertoire on the A section of All the Things You Are. Now, ways to practice this. I strongly recommend that you start with that dominant chord vamp, and you just put that vamp on a play-along or a backing track. You pick one altered pentatonic, and you just experiment with it. Put it on for an hour. I love to just isolate one chord. I'll play on it for an hour. I've played everything I know within 10 seconds, and then it's a real discovery process, and I'm really responsible for getting inside the sound, and my ear starts to hear what it is when those tension notes come in and out. That's, again, going to train us to hear those pentatonics. Remember that everything we do is ear training. All right, remember to grab the free PDF from the link in the description below. It's got all of our examples and everything labeled nice and neatly. This way you can practice it. I've got all instruments available in terms of B flat, E flat, and C instruments. Make sure you grab it. Now, if this video helped you level up your sound, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want that more modern sound, remember you can always alter your pentatonics. Happy practicing.